Make real change. Make change real. The process is beautiful. Empower your mentality, make real change in the world. Make real change in the world. This is Coach King. I'm back. I think we were talking about uncertainty in the previous episode. Uncertainty and to overcome that unbelief. Help me with my unbelief. I've taken, meditation to a whole nother level. Prayer gets rid of all of the doubt and uncertainty. It's a communication tool with God, and it's a way for you to connect. Prayer is connection. It's communication with the divine, right? Communication with God. Self-talk, self-motivations are tools that they teach us in corporate, especially in leadership, reflecting to help us regulate our emotions, to help us regulate ourselves. Also, not just ourselves, but the conversations that we have, we can regulate that personal need. Okay. So it's a godly principle is what I'm trying to say. And it's something that is successful. So when you're trying to manage the change that the uncertainty that change brings in your life, just make sure that you are connected, you're grounded. And for me, that grounding starts with prayer. And but it also brings about a self-talk that has to happen, a self-reflection that has to happen, a understanding where my emotions is, right? Where am I at emotionally? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I mad? Whatever it is. I have to be in tune with those things before I begin to speak to people in a leadership role. And especially if I'm the one that is trying to communicate changes, or if I'm the one that's receptive of change, I still need to understand where I am. Followers and leaders both have the responsibility to do what? Regulate their own emotions. So that was uncertainty. That's the aspect of uncertainty that life brings us. So this next one, forgive me. I'm toiling with it, right? So this next aspect is the aspect of resistance. Life is full of resistance. Resistance is an essential part of life. Without resistance, it would be impossible to move forward. In life, for every step forward, there is an aspect of resistance. Every time your foot hits the ground, you are facing resistance of some sort. Resistance is the only way that can propel you forward, right? Without resistance, it would be impossible for us to move forward. When your feet hits the ground resists you. Okay? That's the law of perpetual motion. You have resistances here. If you were to throw a ball, right, the air resistance hits the ball and it slows the speed of the ball, correct? In a way, resistance is nature's way of just saying hello. One of my favorite coaches, you guys probably follow him all over YouTube. He's all over social media space. Myron Golden says, with every intention follows disruption. I believe T.D. Jakes wrote a book about disruption. Every intention follows disruption. That means resistance is a two-way street. So either something is resisting your intentions or you're resisting something else's intentions. And that is an aspect that change brings on. It's the magnetism, right? It's the polar similarities, right? They resist each other. When you have two of the same energies, they don't connect, right? There's an aspect of resistance. Okay, bad analogy. However, intentionality is met with resistance because most intentions, when you intend to do something, you intend to change something. So pay attention to what the intentions are. Intentions could be good. Intentions can be bad. But when you intend to do something, there is an aspect of change. And sometimes it's present in circumstances, or it is a progressional change from a starting point to an end point. So we have to understand that. So when life is challenging and a need for change is evident, this is where this aspect, I feel, can be best illustrated for our understanding. This is often a time where we begin to hold on to things that are familiar, or where some of us will resist the necessary change. So that's that two-way street. This is the point where we might even resist the truth from even changing, right? Everyone says the truth shall set you free, but again, that doesn't come with freedom. It comes with resistance sometimes. The truth, people resist the truth. And from a 10,000 foot view of someone observing that, it seems almost too plain. But if it ever happened to you, sometimes the truth hurts because you are mentally resisting what's being told to you. Think about someone breaking up with you and you're in love with them and they're just not really into you. For the person saying, I'm not really into you, they're being honest. And they've no longer resisted the idea of hurting your feelings. So they're now telling you, right, that I don't like you, right? I'm not in love with you like you love me. But imagine being on the receiving end. It's hard for you to realize that sometimes. Oh, dang, how come I thought everything was. See, that's the resistance in your head. So remember, it starts with your mind. It's your mentality. We have to figure out a way to embrace and to deal with this resistance, because you feel it, you express it, you think it, and you express it. So how do we deal with that? Let's look at the best book in the world, and that's the Bible, of course. So I start with Zechariah 7:8-14, and this is the NIV. And the word of the Lord came again to Zechariah. This is what the Lord Almighty said: administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Do not plot evil against each other. But they refused to pay attention. Stubbornly, they turned their backs and covered their ears. They made their hearts as hard as flint. It would not listen to the law or the words that the Lord Almighty has sent by his Spirit through the earlier prophets. So the Lord Almighty was very angry. When I called, they did not listen. So when they called, I would not listen, says the Lord Almighty. I scattered them with a whirlwind among all the nations where they were strangers. The land they left behind them was so desolate that no one traveled through it. This is how they made the pleasant land desolate. So resistance from a God standpoint, when you resist truth, you leave the land desolate. When you resist honesty, it leads to nothing. There's no fruit in it. It's a desert. It's like being in the middle of the desert. There's no water. It's dry. It's a dry place when there's lacks truth. When you resist the truth and you do not adhere to it. Yes, this verse is about obedience to what God had been telling them, right? Which is the truth. But it's also an aspect of resistance, because what God's original intention was, right? God's intention was administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Do not plot evil against each other. But they resisted. They resisted in their minds to pay attention or to remember what was said to them. Resistance can happen. It starts here first. So when they resisted, what happens is they made their hearts as hard as flint. So they hardened themselves and they weren't open to it. Okay. Let's go to another story of resistance. Another story is the story of Jonah. In this story, Jonah was given an assignment from God to preach to the people of Nineveh. But Jonah disobeys. Disobedience, right? Jonah 1:1-3. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it. For the wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So I think anybody who's read the Bible have heard the story of Jonah. Jonah resists God's command. He disobeys. He gets swallowed by the whale, right? The whale ends up taking him to his assignment because God's plan and his will was way greater than Jonah's resistance. Okay. As the story unveils, Jonah, while on the ship in Tarshish, has to deal with God and everyone around him because he becomes compromised because of his resistance to change that God wanted for the people of Nineveh. So he resisted the change that God wanted for people that Jonah was being racist towards, essentially. Like, he's like, I'm not doing that. These people don't deserve freedom. They deserve purgatory. They deserve what's coming to them, right? And Jonah did not believe that they needed the change in their lives, the change that God was going to bring in the sovereignty that in the peace that he was bringing to the land, right? Because he did not want to bring the message of, hey, listen, if you guys don't change, this is going to whatever, right? So Jonah, while on the ship in Tarshish, he has to deal with God. Well, how'd that happen? Well, the ship started doing all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And the people in the ship, they had to draw straws and figure out what was going on. They prayed to their gods, like, what is going on? Why is the storm so bad? There has to be something going on here. Now, these people that were on the ship with Jonah were not believers. And it's so interesting how a non-believing group of people pointed out, said, your God is mad at you. So we're going to throw you off the boat. So they threw him off the boat. So this aspect of change for us can look like disobedience. So resistance, in a way, in Jonah's character, is disobedience. Think of a time in your childhood when your parents asked you to do something. It could be as simple as cleaning your room, washing the dishes, or doing other chores around the house. Like Jonah, we resisted the change with disobedience. Think now of the consequences of your disobedience. What happened in the moment to you? Did you have to go through a strong wind? So let's look at Jonah 1:4-9, this strong wind that happened. So this is the situation I just kind of explained, but this is the actual words in the Bible. So Jonah 1:4-9, it says, but the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship was about to be broken up. Then the mariners were afraid, and every man cried out to his God, right? They had their own gods, and threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah was gone down into the lowest parts of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came to him and said to him, what do you mean, sleeper? Arise, call on your God. Perhaps your God will consider us so that we may not perish. And they said to one another, come, let us cast lots that we may know for whose cause this trouble has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, please tell us, for whose cause is the trouble upon us? What is your occupation, and where did you come from? What is your country, and what people are you? So he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. With so much to unpack, resistance to change can cause others to lose. So when your resistance to change, it not only impacts you, but it impacts everybody around you, especially those who don't share the same ethics, morals, and values that you share. So it's the people who don't know the things that you know, the people who are ignorant to the things that you know. When you are responsible for it, that's even worse. So as leaders, resistance to change is catastrophic. We have to embrace it because it's inevitable. So unlike Jonah, his resistance caused everybody to lose, right? So especially those who don't share the same ethics, morals, and values that you share. The resistance to change pushed Jonah out of the presence of God, right? It pushed him out of the presence of God. This would be like an investor reading all the consumer reports, knowing that the company is the wave of the future, and yet is resistant to buy the stock at $2 a share. Like, who didn't in 2019? If we knew that this Nvidia thing would happen, who would have bought it in 2019 when it was $5 a share? I would have bought as much as I could possibly buy. Right? Give me 1,000 shares of that at $5. Let me invest about $5,000 into this stock. Why? Because it's right now it's at 100. I would have 100x'd my investment. I would have, well, no, not 100x, 20x'd whatever I put in. So just keep that in mind. Or better yet, think about the administrator who is responsible for staffing the department but decides to quit without proper notice, right? Think about the gap that it leads. When you resist the change, right? You resist changes. Think about the gap you're leaving behind. And you don't give enough notice, so you just quit out the blue, right? And then think about this. Think about how it affects you when you do that. So when you go look for another job, do you think that you get a good reference from a previous employer because you quit without proper notice? You didn't put it 2 weeks and you just, oh, I'm done. Nope, I don't like it. I'm out. Think about it. People do it all the time and then expect to get a better job. Oh, forget this job. You know what I mean? I don't need this place. And they just leave. But then, 6 months later, when all that PTO runs out that you accrued, right? Or when that unemployment line is, saying, hey, man, you need to get a job at this point. Or, your back's against the wall, funds low, you need something. Or they look at your previous employment and say, what happened? What are you going to tell them? Do you see how catastrophic being resistant to change can be in this context? Not just for yourself, but for the people around you. However, change resistance is not always bad. So I was taking a look at the negative aspect of resisting change, but it's not always bad to resist the change, okay? Some changes you have to resist. For example, think about World War II. Think about the French resistance. Vive la resistance, right? They had to. That's a straight up evil. The Bible says to resist evil, right? Right? Literally resist it, right? So think about that type of resistance. That's totally different. When it's completely against your moral and value, it's imperative for you to resist that level of change, right? You can't convert somebody when they are trying to impose their values on you, and it's completely against yours, right? That's a time where resistance to change is enough, right? Unless you find it good. So we have to understand that change brings upon this aspect of resistance, and we will be faced with it regardless. Okay. So think about Nazi Germany, the occupation of Nazi Germany in France. Okay. You have to resist that. All right. So in the Bible, Moses resisted change on behalf of his people to change the mind of God. What? I thought God doesn't change. Okay, let's look at Exodus 32, 7 through 14. Okay. And the Lord said to Moses, go, get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. He's like, leave, get out of here. The people are going crazy. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf and worship it and sacrifice to it and said, this is your God, O Israel. They brought you out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Now, therefore, let me alone, and my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them. And I will make you a great nation. Then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God and said, Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, and with great power and with a mighty hand? See, his resistance was for everybody else. See, the Lord was like, nope, I don't tolerate that. God was like, no, thou shalt not have any other gods before me, remember? So how could you take an idol and worship it? Right? Moses also asked, why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Moses made a petition. You got to think about it. He asked God a question. Moses was curious in his resistance. Sometimes resistance of change your response should be curiosity, right? Moses asked questions. He didn't tell God what to do. He asked him a question. He said, why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath and relent from this harm to your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of I give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. Guess what the Bible says? It says, so the Lord relented from the harm which he said he would do to his people. That's powerful. Interesting what curiosity and remaining curious and asking the risky question will do for you. Don't be afraid to do that. The best way to resist change isn't really resistance at all. It's literally asking a question. It's posing a question that makes sense. It's risky because it's God. God could stroke Moses dead right there. But God had promises with Moses. Sometimes to resist change, you have to stand in the gap. For example, a manager may want to fire a staff member for incompetent skill sets. However, as their leader, you can stand in the gap and remind the manager why they were hired in the first place. This is not an easy task, but notice the differences in the aspects of resistance. Resistance from sheer disobedience is different from resistance for a purpose or cause. Moses and the French had a good reason to resist, while Jonah and the Israelites just went the opposite direction to deviate the change. They were more behavioral, deviant people. So, when dealing with this aspect of change, it is important for you to remain curious if you want to stand in the right standing. If you want to stand in the gap, think about Moses. And that's all I got. Aspect of resistance, it's an easy one. If you're going to stand in the gap, make sure that your cause is good and make sure that you remain curious in a way that's inquisitive and that you can ask the risky question, right? Not saying that it always gets your way, but the change, the resistance that you bring when you ask a question, what you do is it's a tug of war that's being played. You're using the rules essentially to make the best decision for everybody around. Because remember, resistance leaves people desolate. It eliminates all the fruit, right? When a resistance happens, everything burns. The level of change is catastrophic. not just for yourself, but for the people around you. So this aspect, when you experience resistance changes, those are adaptability shifts. That's an adaptive shift. And what I mean by that is it's not a technical shift. It's not like, oh, I can just turn the dial and the room will get cooler. No. When big change is on your horizon, when organizational cultures are changing, to change a culture of people, you have to shift the values and norms. That is an adaptive change. You have to adapt. You have to switch, which we'll talk about later. So again, I've been talking 25 minutes. I know it's really short. You're probably used to some groundbreaking things, but this is very simple. So the aspect of resistance. So this is Coach King. Make real change. Make change real. The process is beautiful. Empower your mentality. Make real change in the world. Peace out.